Hey everyone, welcome. I'm Chris Lesniak,
And I'm Rob Byer, and this is.
the Debate Math Podcast.
We have a great episode for you today. But first, let's take a quick minute to talk about the debate format.
So, two things. One, in the language, you'll hear a little bit possibly of claim and warrant. It's what I do with my students and what I talked about in my book. The claim is your side, your opinion you're arguing for, and the warrant is just a fancy name for your reason. And two, the format of this is our first full debate episode here. We're going to do what's often called an Oxford style debate. There'll be an opening statement from each side. Then we'll have a more casual questioning round. And then at the end, each side will get one more chance to wrap up with closing statements. So that's it, opening, questions, and closing.
And with our debates and all debates on all of our episodes, we're wanting them to be very conversational and also very respectful of both sides.
And with that, let's talk about our exciting debate on today's episode.
Now, you may have heard on Twitter the Great Trapezoid Debate of 2021, debating the definition of trapezoids.
And here, debating for the exclusive definition of a trapezoid, is lead teacher at the Discovery School and presidential awardee for excellence in mathematics and science, Zak Champagne. Hi, Zak. Zak,
hey everybody.
Just tell us really quickly where you're coming from and what your current role is.
Yeah, I'm Zak Champagne. I hail from Jacksonville, Florida, born and raised here. And I'm currently a third and fourth grade teacher at the Discovery School right here in Jacksonville, Florida.
And arguing against Zak for the inclusive definition is math educator, Twitter loudmouth, superstar, and potential first winner of the first debate math podcast, Shelby Strong. Hi, Shelby.
Hello, gentlemen. It is lovely to be here with you all today.
Shelby, we hear that we're going to be seeing you soon at some upcoming NCTM conferences. What are you going to be speaking about, and where can we find you?
Yeah, so Justin Ion and I are going to be presenting together two different sessions at the NCTM regional conferences in New Orleans and in Indianapolis. So come check us out. We actually give a shout out to Chris in one of our presentations. So I'm really excited to get off of Twitter for a little bit and see some people in person again.
That's awesome. So where are you coming from, and what is your current role?
So I am just outside of New Orleans, Louisiana, born and raised, very proud West Banker. And I am still here. And I'm a little bit of everything at the moment. So I am doing some math coaching and consulting and some professional development. I'm doing review for some curriculum. I'm tutoring. I'm a little bit all over the place, but having my finger in lots of different pots has been really nice because I get a much broader perspective on how all the pieces of education fit together.
That's great. Well, welcome.
Yes, I think you're not alone in wearing many different hats in this current Zoom room here.
Very true.
Oh, yes.
And now, so thank you for introducing yourselves. Now we have one question we want to ask all of our guests.
So, and Shelby, we're going to start with you. When did math first become controversial to you?
I think math first became controversial to me when I realized that there were things that had obvious answers and not obvious answers. So when I went through, my regular K-12 education, math was pretty straightforward. You did the things, you followed the procedures, you got the answers, ta-da. And then I got to college, and suddenly there were things that were up for debate. There were things that weren't settled. There were things where you couldn't prove that it was true, but you also couldn't prove it was false. And that blew my mind, that for the first time I could have an opinion on something in mathematics. It wasn't just true or false. And that really kind of opened the door for me in my love of mathematics.
Nice. And how about Zak? When was math first controversial to you?
Yeah, great question. Much like Shelby, I would argue that my first experience with the controversy actually started when I was a teacher. So I had been teaching for a few years, and I was leading some professional learning when we were implementing the investigations in number, data, and space program in our elementary schools. So K-5. At the time, it was what folks called a reform-based curriculum. This was 1999, 2000. No jokes, Shelby. You can keep that inside about how old I am at this point. I was working with some teachers, and it was kind of how I learned to cut my teeth as a teacher, was through that program and through this very conceptual based learning program. And there was some controversy in there, and like why we weren't just telling kids what to do and showing them what to do and having them practice it. So I think for me, it wasn't a pure math sort of controversy. It was more of a math ed controversy. And that's the first time I sort of came to know this.
Wow. So before we begin today's debate, there's a story behind this and how this came about. Could you give us a little background on how this got started and how you two are connected and why the definition of a trapezoid has been debatable?
Absolutely. So I first met Zak through attending the Mount Holyoke College graduate program for teaching mathematics that I no longer attend because I am now a graduate. And so in the summer of 2020, Zak was my instructor in one of the courses of this geometry course. And the course was going along, we were doing great. And then one day, just kind of out of left field, a comment came up about trapezoids, to which Zak stated that, of course, that they have only one pair of parallel sides. And about half of the class just went into an uproar. Like, what do you mean? They have at least one pair of parallel sides, and derailed class for a good 30 minutes at least. Continued to derail class for the rest of the week as well. Then class was over. Classes are only a week long. So the following summer, we had Zak as our instructor again. And it was kind of nice because we got to get back into the rhythm of things. But of course, as these things tend to do, trapezoids came up again and reignited the controversy all over. The opposing camps are being decided. We're getting into arguments on Twitter. We're taking pictures of trapezoids in the wild, tagging each other in them. And what I didn't realize at the time was that Zak had recorded a video for us for graduation, reigniting the trapezoid debate again. He came to class one day having changed his Zoom name to Zak is inclusive with people, but exclusive with trapezoids, and then put that little line in his Twitter bio. I took a screenshot of that, complaining, and that's really what sparked, that's really what threw gas on the fire, because then people were saying that should be on a shirt. Somebody tagged in Berkeley, and then we decided to go ahead and design our trapezoid shirts. And we thought the matter was settled because the agreement was whichever shirt sold more in that month was going to be the winner, but somebody is a sore loser and has decided that those results are null and void. So here we are.
Here we are. I mean, yeah, like we want to reignite this thing again. And Chris and Rob have asked us to kind of have this conversation, this debate, to make sure that we know who the true winner is. And just as Shelby mentioned, huge shout out to Berkeley, Everett, and check out, everybody's got our Berkeley shirts on. All of us are wearing some version of his awesomeness, who reached out to us and said, hey, I can actually make those shirts. And I think it was Berkeley who came up with the idea of making the opposite shirt. I think the original thing was we were just going to make this shirt. And then I think he came up with the idea to let's make two, we'll sell them both. And then of course that determined who was the winner. And it was not me. We definitely sold more inclusive shirts than exclusive shirts during that first month, but we get another chance. TeamExclusive. This is our time. Here we go.
You do. And with that, I think it's time for us to get into this debate to once and for all hear both sides out and decide who is the winner. So let's debate. All right. As we begin our debate, we'll start with opening statements. Each side will have 2 minutes to make their case for how we should define a trapezoid. And based on a coin flip before this recording, Zak won. Shelby called heads, and unfortunately it was tails. So Zak, you're up first, and your time begins now.
I'm going to go on record and say that it's fortunately, not unfortunately, Chris. But for now, let's get started. Folks, listen, I love trapezoids. And I love thinking about and talking about trapezoids. And much of the math world loves arguing about what definition we ascribe to for how we think about trapezoids. But just to level set, for those of you that might be new to this, here's that brief overview that Shelby gave a minute ago. Exclusive definition states that trapezoids have exactly one pair of parallel sides. And the inclusive definition states that trapezoids have at least one pair of parallel sides. So why is it this exactly versus at least such a big difference? Like, how can those two little words make that big of a difference, this big of a debate? Well, if you're team exclusive like me, trapezoids are special, right? They have their own place in the hierarchy of quadrilaterals, and it lets them be classified as trapezoids, quadrilaterals, and polygons. That's it. That's the whole lineage. They get their own special place right over here that shows how rad they actually are. And in fact, they're so rad that they deserve that happy little spot just to show how special they are. Now, because in my mind, when everything's a trapezoid, is anything really a trapezoid? So if your team inclusive, like Shelby is, trapezoids now live at the top of an already cumbersome and complex relationship of quadrilaterals. Team inclusive says that squares, rhombuses, rectangles, parallelograms, they're all special trapezoids. And then, of course, trapezoids are also classified as quadrilaterals and as polygons. But to me, this route is just unnecessarily complex, right? And so where would we even stop, right? If everything becomes inclusive, like, do we call everything everything kind of backs up from there? So, it came up on Twitter that is anyone really willing to make the claim that we should say triangles are polygons with at least 3 sides? Right? Is that how far we're going to go? Where do we stop here? So my biggest reason for staying team exclusive is that it simplifies things. It makes things much more understandable and clear in my mind. But ultimately, and I hope this comes across throughout, and I'm sure you heard from Shelby and I'm not actually interested in all of us having to agree on one definition. This ambiguity is what makes this conversation, what makes this debate so interesting to me. And it's a conversation where clearly we want to feel right because that's fun, but being right isn't really the point. It's the conversation that matters. To me, it's about what's gained and what's lost by each definition. And it just reminds me that, like, for myself and for so many of us that are listening right now, math isn't just about answers. It's about the conversation.
And with that, that's time. I gave you a little 30 seconds since you were explaining what exclusive and inclusive were as well. But Shelby, if you need that as well, you can. All right.
Yeah, all right. Thank you, Zach. And now we're going to hear from the opposing side. Shelby, you do have 2 minutes with potential extended time like soccer. And your time begins now.
Well, I know how to follow rules, so I'm only going to need 2 minutes. I actually did not care all that much about trapezoids until this debate sparked up, and I just wanted to be right. And the more that I looked into it, the more that I realized that it really is kind of messed up that trapezoids are the only quadrilateral that we purposefully exclude. So Zach talked about how you want trapezoids to be special and unique, but really I see it as pushing them to the side and not letting them be a part of the quadrilateral family. So if you look at the properties of trapezoids, including the area formula, that works all the way down the branch, because this isn't really an argument about trapezoids so much as it is an argument about parallelograms. Do the properties of parallelograms hold true if we call parallelograms trapezoids? And if we think about it, we have a model of that being successful because we know that rectangles are parallelograms. We know that squares are rectangles, and we have no problem with those arguments. So if we really wanted to simplify things, then we would break the entire hierarchy and we would take away squares being rectangles. We would take away rectangles being parallelograms, but we don't do that. So why the purposeful exclusion of trapezoids from these branches of the family tree? Additionally, because trapezoids have these natural pathways to both parallelograms and to rhombuses, we get a more complete picture of what quadrilaterals look like. And finally, I agree with Zach 100%. This debate really is about the discussion. It's about the idea that they can have opinions about mathematics, that we can have ambiguity, that we can have a lot of space in between for nuance and for discussion and for argument in a way that makes us hold true and in a way that allows us to, there's my timer, in a way that allows us to name an argument, come up with evidence for it, and defend it.
Awesome. Thank you both. That concludes our opening statements. And so now we're going to move into a question round. Rob and I have just a few questions to flesh out your arguments a little more. But I just want to first thank you both. You're both addressing the idea that like we want math to be about, exploring the definition and getting into the detail here. You're both approaching this each side with passion. I'm hearing, Zach, that you really want trapezoids to be special in their own category, and Shelby, in your inclusive definition, it becomes more just about theorems become more about parallelograms and not specifically trapezoid things. Um, and so let me start by asking Zach. So if we stick to what we're doing now, do you have any concern with like we're being too traditional? We're just like continuing on the same things that have always been. Is that an issue at all?
It's a great question, and we should all maybe do some work. I wonder, and we've seen some of this on Twitter. I wonder how long this debate has been happening, right? How long have we been discussing these two definitions? And yeah, I would like to go on record and say the area formula that Shelby sort of talks about in her argument is a powerful one, right? I see that, I get that. So let's get that out on there before I get called out for that. But I also think there is something nostalgic to me a little bit about trapezoids being defined as exclusive. And maybe that's because that's how I learned it. So there is that sort of like, am I living in the sort of past? Am I not thinking forward enough? Again, I wonder about where it stops. When do we how inclusive do we get if we clump trapezoids into this lineage?
And then Shelby, to you, are we being too inclusive then? Do we just call everything shapes and stop giving names to them?
Well, I did not see the argument that Zach saw where triangles would be called at least three sides. That is not an argument I have been privy to. But I do think that there is space for things being rigid, but there's also space for things to be more inclusively defined. And so I think that if we have these definitions in place where we're talking about parallel sides, that's not going anywhere. We're talking about four sides, that's not going anywhere. The only thing that's being added is the addition for more shapes to fall into that trapezoid definition. And what harm does that do to let parallelograms be trapezoids? What disruptions does that make to what we hold true in mathematics? What theorems get broken? None of them.
And Shelby, kind of moving a little bit further into like the definition, the dictionary definition, we saw the exclusive definition when we looked it up in the dictionary. It says a quadrilateral having only two sides parallel. So do you suggest that these all be changed?
I would like to go on the record saying that the dictionary has been written by people who like to give definitions to words that are no longer accurate. So I would say that the dictionary is not a great place to be looking at definitions for math terms. But I would also say, and this might be controversial, that if you looked at Wikipedia, which is not written by, it's not set in stone, it is written and fact-checked by numerous individuals, volunteers, that Wikipedia gives the definition of trapeziums, or as we Americans call them, trapezoids, to be at least one pair of parallel sides.
And you had nothing to do with that Wikipedia definition?
I do not know how to do
Okay.
Wikipedia.
She crowdsourced it. She got lots of folks.
we don't know. Can I follow up, Shelby? You said something about the like the area formula doesn't change, like things are still okay and stuff. The one thing I think about a lot with trapezoids, the only theorem I remember talking about with students is that the base angles of a isosceles trapezoid are congruent. But if every parallelogram is also an trapezoid, then that doesn't hold true anymore. So do we have to throw out some theorems?
Well, I think that it depends on how we define isosceles trapezoids, and I will give full credit to, let me make sure that I have the right people, Will Rose and John Chase, who actually had this argument at NCTM in 2018. And I do believe that it was, I'm trying to remember who was on TeamInclusive. So the thing is John. So John actually talked about rectangles being isosceles trapezoids, but parallelograms wouldn't necessarily be unless they were rectangles. So you would have to have that distinction of where the base angles are opposite. And so you would lose some of the parallelograms, but you would pick up again at rectangles.
Now, Zach, with going back into the definitions and being a classroom teacher, teaching third and fourth grade, why do you think that so many states have different definitions for trapezoids? Because I live in Pennsylvania, and we honor your side of the argument when we teach our trapezoids. However, I know other states have differing opinions. So, what's your take on states having different definitions for the trapezoids, and how can we bring everybody together to be on, I guess, your side?
So this is a great question. And I would say, I think different states have different adopted definitions because of testing. And that's the wrong reason. I think that's the wrong reason to have an agreed upon definition. I would just say, maybe we should switch states. Florida has just adopted TeamInclusive. And if you want to be like Florida, go ahead and be TeamInclusive. That's all I'll say about that.
Cheap shots.
But I do think they have to have a formal definition for testing so that they can check off a standard, which is the very opposite, I think, of what we're trying to do with this conversation, right? What you guys are trying to do with debate math, like that. To me, and I said this a little bit in my opening statement, to me, what I like to do with my third and fourth graders when we explore quadrilaterals is look at both definitions and look at what's gained and what's lost, right? Like, what do you get if you have TeamInclusive? What does that hierarchy look like? And what do you gain if you do TeamInclusive? Look at the hierarchy there. And then what's lost in both, right? That nuance is the math that's interesting to me, right? That's the math that I want to talk about. And then, I've got a math club I run after school, and they all purchase T-shirts of which team they were on. But then kids are talking about trapezoids, right? Like, isn't that the win if fourth graders are walking around wearing trapezoid shirts? So for me, it's about that conversation and not about just saying this is the right definition and this state says this thing, this says the other thing.
So for both of you, would you both be in favor of states and dictionaries and things having both definition or only one of your definitions?
So that's one of the nice things about the Wikipedia is that they do include that section where it talks about the controversy and it talks about some of the debate. And an interesting thing that came up that I think is part of why this debate is happening is because a lot of people will say, okay, so then what do you call the things that don't have any parallel sides? And that's where you kind of get into the etymology a little bit, where trapezoid is actually the wrong word. And that we should be calling these things trapeziums because trapezoid, that oid ending on the end, it means that it's something that's trapezium-like. And so just like android is something that's human-like. And that's kind of where things went awry, I think, is that we lost that word to capture all the things that weren't trapezoids. And that kind of allowed for this ambiguity to get lost in translation, quite literally.
So would you have a name for things that have one parallel sides, but not the other pair?
No, I think they can just be happy little trapeziums.
I'll go on record and say I'd love math textbooks and dictionaries to offer both. And well, we won't go quite down the ambiguity rabbit hole, but make up your own definition for a trapezoid, kids. Like, that would be kind of fun. Is there another way we could think about these things? I mean, for me, a PhD mathematician once told me when we were trying to think, we had this really interesting question about a decimal. And basically he said, the decimal it is exactly whatever you make it. And I was like, that's not an answer you want from a PhD mathematician. I want you to tell me what's right or wrong right here, right? But like, that's how mathematicians think about these things. It's like, we decide, right? We the people, right? We can come up with these things and debate them, right?
Kind of going with this is going to be a question for both of you. This conversation about trapezoids, what effect do you think this is going to have on students and on like classroom culture? And Shelby, I'll let you go first, and then we'll go with Zach after that. But this conversation, how can we relate this to our students and bring this to light with the kids and make it about them?
This is actually something I've been really passionate about for quite a long time, that I think we do students a disservice when we don't allow them opportunities to communicate authentically in the math classroom. So if you are in an English classroom, if you're in a social studies classroom, if you're in a science classroom, students are communicating with one another. They're debating ideas, and they walk into math class and it's sit in your desk and follow this rule and don't ask questions. And it's no wonder that students grow up to be adults who can't stand the thought of math and recoil at the very mention of math when we haven't given them a chance to play with it, when we haven't given them a chance to be a mather, in the words of Deborah Beard. When we give them a chance to really engage in their learning, to be authors of their learning, that's when they have an opportunity to develop real deep connections with the subject. And if they don't, that's okay too. Not every kid's going to walk away loving poetry or loving rocks or whatever they do in science, but we've given them that opportunity. So this could only be positive.
And Zach?
Yeah, I co-sign 100%. I think this is, and I know I've already said it, and I'll keep saying it. But this is the conversation for me. This is what the teaching and learning of mathematics is about, and what I hope others will see it's about. And I think I can only see positive, results for kids, because again, when they're thinking about and talking about trapezoids at the dinner table with their folks, like what a win that is, right? We made it home, right?
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. I think that's a great note to end our questioning round here. Thank you both. Some great thoughts there. And then let's move into our final round here, are the closing statements. We'll give each debater 1 minute to make their final argument to listeners. And the coin toss winner, Zach, will begin with you.
All right. Folks, I'll say it again. I love trapezoids. I love thinking and talking about them. And I want trapezoids to have that special place in all of our hearts that lives right over here to the left in that sort of lovely exclusive definition. When we see it, when you first make that branch of the number of parallel sides, it makes everything super clear to me to say, these things have exactly one pair of parallel sides. The rest of these things over here have two pairs of parallel sides. That break makes things so crystal clear for me, and it allows for our friends, the trapezoid, to live in its special place of infamy right over there for all of its awesomeness.
And and the final word with Shelby. Go ahead.
So for all of Zach's talk about inclusivity, it really sounds very exclusive to want somebody to be shoved in a corner and say, oh, you're special, but you can go be special over there. And so I really want all of us to embrace this idea that trapezoids belong with the rest of the quadrilaterals, and they are important and special because they are a really meaningful beginning to our understanding of the rest of the quadrilaterals that come after them. And I think that it's really important that we acknowledge that sometimes the things that we learned when we were children were wrong, and when you were presented with new information and evidence, it's okay to change your mind.
Wiser words have never been spoken. All right. And that concludes our debate. Thank you so much. And we're going to pause here for folks just to think and ponder, and then we'll talk about how we can vote. Folks on the podcast can't see, but Zach has a secret chalkboard behind him where he's pointing at his TeamExclusive. So if you enjoyed our debate, we'd love for you to go to our Twitter at DebateMathPod and vote. We'll put a poll up right now, and it'll be up there for you to vote for who you think was more convincing, who gave the best reasoning in this debate.
And we're going to leave it up for about a week to tally up the results leading up to our next episode. And then at the beginning of the next episode, we will talk about the results, and maybe we'll find a new winner, or we'll verify the Shelby being the winner. One of the two.
Well, huge thanks to our guests. Thank you for your thoughtful, respectful debate, for really getting us to argue about math, which many people think is impossible. We learned, I don't know about you, Rob, but I learned so much more about trapezoids. And like Zach, you had said, like that's where the math is, in that like gray area there where we're discussing the nuance.
Yeah, and I also, I was writing down so many things during when you were talking, and triangles being polygons with at least three sides was like one of my big ahas, like to really ponder and think about. But also, trapezoids being the only polygon that you're purposefully excluding. is what Shelby said. So like those are two like big takeaways that I wrote down and kind of underlined both of them because that's one of things that I'm going to take away from this conversation, this debate, for me to ponder on and then vote on later.
Good. And as we say our farewells, Zach, where can people find you and learn more about you and your work?
Yeah, for our video friends that are here, it's all on the screen now, but I realize this is probably an audio medium for most. I'm on Twitter at ZakChamp.com. Zak is Z-A-K, and then Champ is C-H-A-M-P. You can find my writings and musings, many of them about trapezoids, at ZakChamp.com. Again, ZakChamp.com. And email is ZacharyChampagne@gmail.com. Would love to keep this conversation going.
That's Zach with a K, no C, as I learned.
Right. And Shelby, where can we find you?
Yeah, if you would like to talk about math with me, you can follow me on Twitter at StrongerMath. Yeah, stronger. Okay. So if you want me to talk about math and a bunch of other stuff with me, as my ADHD tends to make happen, you can follow me instead on Twitter at Snuffleupagus. It's like Mr. Snuffleupagus, but with an E. So that's SNEFFLU. Wait, how do I spell my name?
SNEFFLEUPAGUS.
I don't have to type my own username, so I never have to know how it's spelled. Like I just start SNE and it comes up. Like
I cheated. I had it in front of me. So.
And additionally, if you are interested in longer form thoughts and other ways to get in touch, my website is strongermath.com.
Excellent. And thank you to our listeners for listening in today and spending some time. Don't forget to reach out with us with any questions or comments. You can use our website, debatemath.com.
Also, check us out on Twitter at DebateMathPod. You can also tweet at us with the hashtag DebateMathPod. Anytime a conversation or a debate pops up, whether it's with students or with colleagues or with parents, feel free to tweet at us and maybe it'll make it on the show.
Yes, and don't forget
that you can use the hashtag TeamExclusive and TeamInclusive as you are talking about this episode.
Excellent. Thank you for adding that in. Yes. And please vote at our Twitter handle. And also we'd appreciate if you'd rate us and review us on Apple Podcasts. And I think, Rob, that's all from us for today.
Yeah, and wherever you listen to this podcast, your feedback's important. So we are looking forward to debating with you again on the next episode. And until next time, cheers, everybody.
Bye. Thank you all.